This is section 7.2, factor by grouping. There are many methods of factoring, and we will only learn a few in this course, so don't get too overwhelmed. But let me give you a heads up for how you know which method you should be using. Last time we learned greatest common factor. You should always check greatest common factor first. Always. In every context from here on out, whenever you're factoring, you should check the greatest common factor first. Here's the next thing. To factor by grouping. If you want to factor by grouping, there needs to be 4 terms. So to factor by grouping, there needs to be 4 terms. If there are not 4 terms, you cannot factor by grouping. Now later on, we're going to learn a method in which you break some terms apart to make 4 terms, but you must do that first. You've got to have 4 terms in order to factor by grouping. So let's do this problem. This problem says factor by grouping CD minus 9D minus 4C plus 36. The first thing I am going to do is to check the greatest common factor. We should always check that first. So let's see. Do they have anything in common? Well, let's see. This one has no number, which means the biggest thing it's divisible by is 1. So we really don't care about the rest of these numbers because the biggest thing they'd be divisible by is 1. So they don't really have any numbers in common. Then you can check your letters. You might say, well, there's a C, but this one doesn't have a C, and this one doesn't have a C, so they don't all have a C in common. You might say, what about D? Well, this one doesn't have a D, and this one doesn't have a D, so they don't all have a D in common. So in conclusion, they have no numbers in common, they have no letters in common, so they have nothing in common. That means the GCF, the greatest common factor, would be 1, so it does nothing to take it out. So we did this. We checked it. They have nothing in common. Now we proceed. Here's what you're going to do. CD, I'm going to copy it down here, minus 9D minus 4C plus 36. Okay, it's like a 3-step process. So here it is. Step 1, you put parentheses around the first 2. And then you put parentheses around the second 2, but here's a problem. You may not put parentheses here, and this is because we are separating the negative from the 4, and you may never separate a number from its negative. Never separate a number from its negative. That is a problem. So here's what we do instead. I'm going to copy exactly what I have, CD. You don't have to copy it. You could just do this in the same line, but I like to be clear. Instead of putting a minus, I'm going to write plus negative 4. Because minus 4 is the same as plus a negative. And these parentheses stay. Now, I've got a place that I can safely put parentheses. See how those parentheses keep the negative and the 4 together? That is a valid place for those parentheses. All I had to do was stick a little plus in between. So, step 1, you put parentheses and parentheses, but be very careful. Never separate a number from its negative. If it has a negative and you're trying to stick parentheses there, use this trick. Write plus a negative, then put your parentheses. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2, you are going to take out the GCF of each parentheses I'm going to save each group. Take out the GCF of each group. Let me show you what I mean. So if I've got this guy, I'm going to ask myself, what do these first 2 have in common? Well, the first 2 both have a D. So I'm going to take out the D. And then I'm going to write down inside the parentheses what was left. Well, if I took a D out right here, there would be a C left. So I'm going to write C inside my parentheses. And if I took a D out from negative 9D, there is a negative 9 left. And that's it. I took a D out and I'm left with C minus 9. I'm going to do the same exact thing over here. I'm going to take out what they have in common. Well, here's the one thing you should be aware of though. Sometimes we take out a negative, sometimes we don't. Here's how you know, and I'm going to write it. If the first one is negative, take out a negative. If the first one is negative, take out the negative. And when I say take out, I mean divide. I always mean divide for this section. So I'm going to take out the negative. And then I'm going to ask myself, what else do they have in common? Well, both 4 and 36 are divisible by 4. So I'm going to take out a negative 4. Then I'm going to write down what's left. If I take out a negative 4 from the first term, I have C left. And then if I take out or divide, I'm going to do 36 divided by negative 4. Well, 36 divided by negative 4 is negative 9. So that's it. I took out the greatest common factor, what they had in common for the first parentheses, and I took out the greatest common factor, what they had in common for the second parentheses. And now I'm on step 3, and this is the last one. Step 3. Take out the common group. That's not super clear, so let me show you what I mean. Right here, I now have 2 big terms. Here is my first big term. Here is my second big term. I've got 2 big terms. I started with 4 terms. I had 1, 2, 3, 4. Started with 4 terms. Now, because of the way I've grouped it, I've got 2 big terms. But you might notice, what do these 2 big terms have in common? If you said parentheses C minus 9, close parentheses, I guess you don't have to say the parentheses, but they do need to be written. You would be absolutely correct. They both have this expression exactly. We're going to take it out, and we're going to write down what's left. In the first one, the first green box, you take out a C minus 9, you're left with a D. In the second one, if you take out a C minus 9, you're left with negative 4. I'm going to close my parentheses, and that's it. I did it. That is how you factor by grouping. So just a reminder, first check, do they all have something in common? If they do, you should take it out. These did not all have something in common, so we moved on to factor by grouping with these 3 steps. And these notes off to the side are just things to be aware of. You should never separate a number from its negative. And if the first one is negative, you should take out a negative. But as long as you follow these steps and keep these 2 rules in mind, that should do it.